You know, when we read ancient scriptures, we're focused on the words, the stories, the meaning, right? But what if that was only half the story? The source material for today's explainer, the Logos Report, dives into a really fascinating and, yeah, pretty controversial idea that hidden just beneath the surface of the Bible is a deliberate, incredibly complex mathematical code.
So, how would that even work? Well, the key to the whole thing is an ancient practice called gematria, or isopsophy. And listen, this isn't some new age thing someone just cooked up. It was a built in feature of the original languages of the Bible. In both ancient Hebrew and Greek, every single letter also doubled as a number. That means every word, every phrase, every single verse has a numerical value you can actually calculate.
So that brings us to the big question, the one we're really going to dig into. Could the authors of these ancient texts have intentionally woven a mathematical layer into their writing, a kind of code that's been hiding in plain sight for literally thousands of years? All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the one verse that kicks this whole thing off. Then we'll look at a method researchers use to connect the dots across the entire text. After that, we'll get into some even more advanced patterns before seeing how all this math applies to some of the most sacred names in Scripture. Everything, and I mean everything, in this world of biblical mathematics really starts in one place, the very first verse of the Bible, Genesis 1:1. Think of it as the cornerstone, the absolute ground zero for all the analysis that comes after. So, what is so special about these 7 words in the original Hebrew? Well, when you do the math, when you calculate their numerical value using gematria, you get a number that proponents of this theory say is the single most important number in the entire system. And that number is 2701. I know at first glance, it's just a number. It looks pretty random, right? But proponents argue that its properties and its connections are anything but. Now, this is where it starts to get a little wild. Proponents point to what they say is a stunning geometric connection. They claim that 2701 is a special type of number called a triangular number, and they link it to other complex geometric forms, like this one, basically arguing that the Bible's very first verse has this hidden geometric and even theological meaning baked right into it. So we have this foundational number, 2701. But, okay, how does it connect to anything else in the Bible? To figure that out, researchers use a really specific method. It's designed to link verses not just within one language, but across both the Hebrew Old Testament and the Greek New Testament. And this method is called the tetraset. Tetra, means 4. For any given verse, they calculate 4 different values. You have the standard value in Hebrew and Greek, which uses the official letter values, and then you have what's called the ordinal value, which is simpler. It's just numbering the letters in order, 1, 2, 3, again, for both languages. And here is what that looks like for Genesis 1:1. You can see the 4 values they calculated, the ordinal and standard sums in both Hebrew and Greek. Now, when you add all 4 of those together, you get this grand total, 6612. And here is the first really big connection that the source material points to. That total, 6612, is claimed to be the exact standard Hebrew value of a totally different verse, a prophetic one, from the book of Zechariah. Suddenly, there's a potential link across different books, seemingly hidden in the numbers. But the claimed connections don't stop there. If you take the average of just the Hebrew and Greek totals from that Genesis tetraset, you land on 3,306. According to the report, this number is also a big deal. It's claimed to be the exact product you get when you multiply the ordinal Hebrew values for Jesus and the Messiah. Okay, now let's go a little deeper down the rabbit hole and see how these ideas build into even more complicated patterns. The analysis doesn't just stop with simple addition. Researchers start bringing in more complex concepts like prime numbers, mirror values, and even more geometry. So let's take this key phrase from the very end of the Bible, from the book of Revelation. It's a hugely important statement in Christian theology, and when you analyze it using Greek gematria, it supposedly reveals a pretty startling link all the way back to the very beginning. Get this, its value is 2,701, exactly the same number as the Hebrew value for "in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth." The argument here is for a perfect numerical symmetry, like a bookend, connecting the first verse of the Old Testament with a climactic phrase in the New Testament. And just to give you a feel for how complex this can get, here's a method the report calls prime time analysis. It is a multi-step process that's designed to find even deeper connections. As you can see, you start with a name's value, then find the prime number at that specific position in the infinite list of primes, then you reverse the digits of that prime, and then you analyze the sum. It's just one example of how layered these mathematical claims can become.
So now let's focus on how these techniques are used in one of the most important areas of all, the different names and titles for God that you find all through the scriptures.
Here we've got two of the most important divine names. In the Hebrew Old Testament, the personal name for God, often pronounced Yahweh, has a value of 26. Then, in the Greek New Testament, the common title for both God and Jesus is Kyrios, or Lord. So researchers take these two key numbers, 26 and 870, and they start looking for hidden relationships. And this brings us to one of the most complex claims in the report, what they call the Melchizedek pinwheel. It starts with the tetraset value for the name Melchizedek. The argument is that this value can be represented by this geometric pinwheel shape. And inside this shape, researchers claim to find multiple, interlocking patterns that point right back to the number 26, the value of God's name, YAH-WEH, as well as other really significant numbers. Now, the point isn't to follow every single bit of math, but to see the dense web of these alleged connections. This is the kind of thing proponents point to as their evidence. So, what's the ultimate point here? What are they trying to say? The source argues that it's the sheer density of these patterns, connecting different books, spanning across languages, using all sorts of math concepts. That's the core evidence. The claim is that this level of intricate consistency is just way too improbable to be a coincidence, and it must point to a deliberate, maybe even supernatural design. And that really leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? Are we looking at a profound divine code that's been embedded in these ancient texts all along, or is this a powerful demonstration of the human brain's incredible ability to find patterns and meaning even in huge, complex sets of data? Is it a hidden code or our own talent for pattern seeking? That's the real question at the heart of biblical mathematics.